Okay, we're live. I had some difficulty getting up and running here, but Deidre is here. All right, so that's one. Making it happen. So I just noticed that President Biden was going on the air here. Big win in Kansas. I wanted to jump on the air and see what he had to say as well. Kansas, for those of you watching, specifically Deidre, in case are you familiar? You know what? We'll just have a conversation, just you and me, Deidre. Are you familiar with what happened in Kansas last night? Are you familiar with what the Kansas Republicans tried to do to their state constitution? I'll wait for your response, and then I'll give you a response. For anyone else who's watching, if you're out there, let us know, because YouTube tells me literally nobody's watching right now, which sometimes happen. Okay, you're very familiar with it. Good. If you're tuning in later and you're watching this, which is often the case, then Kansas has enshrined in its constitution, the state constitution, not the national constitution, basically the right to abortion. And the Republicans decided, let's get rid of that, especially now that Roe v. Wade is gone, that the Supreme Court has overturned that decision. Hi, Gallon of Stew. Good to see you. So, Gallon of Stew, you're out of the country, so you may not know how this works. The states have their own constitutions. In Kansas, because we're 50 different countries, all put together, is what the United States is. It's United States, and every state is its own country. They are subjugated to the federal government per agreement. They asked to be part of this union. We tried a different arrangement to begin with called the Articles of Confederation. It failed miserably. The Founding Fathers had no idea what they were doing, and they came up with the Constitution. So anyway, in the Kansas state constitution, they have the right to abortion, medical freedom. So Republicans thought, you know what? Let's see if we can take that out. We'll have an election, and we'll see if we can get enough votes to take the right to abortion out of our state constitution. Because all around Kansas, all those little Midwestern states, there's no abortion anymore. And so women have to travel to Kansas in order to get an abortion. So Kansas was kind of a bastion of medical freedom for the Midwest, depending on which state they're coming from. Every state has their own laws, and it's crazy. And the Republicans would like to have a national no abortion law put into place, and that's why the midterms are so important coming up. Here's what the Republicans did, though. They tried to hide this by having it in a primary election. Not even in the regular election coming up in November, but a primary election which happened last night, and it got soundly defeated. Those who are pro-choice turned up en masse, like no other primary election before. This was like a regular election in terms of the Democratic and or independent turnout. So now, just a few minutes ago, this is just a few minutes old right now, President Biden came out and is giving an update on reproductive health care access, meaning abortion. It's got other stuff in there as well, but the big one, of course, is abortion, because Biden, although he used to be anti-abortion, is now pro-choice.
Thank you, Vice President Harris, for leading.
That is not going through the right outlet, so let's see if I can put it in the right outlet. For a while there, YouTube wouldn't even let me start, so let's see if I can get this going.
Today's meeting, and thanks to you, all of you, especially Health and Human Services Secretary Becerra and Director of the Gender Policy Council, Jen Klein, for co-chairing this task force, and Attorney General Garland, Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas, and Veterans Affairs Secretary McDonough for your work on this task force. To protect access to a woman's right to choose reproductive health care in the wake of the Supreme Court's extreme decision of wiping out a 50-year constitutional precedent of Roe v. Wade.
By the way, the Supreme Court has never taken away freedom, individual freedom, before. And this Supreme Court, oh, well, that's not extreme. Biden called them extreme. That's not extreme. No, that's extreme. We don't take away freedom in this country. The Supreme Court has never done it before. This is the first time.
I created this task force by executive order last month, and to ensure that every part of the federal government does its part at this critical moment where women's health and lives are on the line amidst chaos and uncertainty unleashed by this decision. Emergency medical care being denied to women experiencing miscarriages. Doctors uncertain about what they can do to provide for the patients. Pharmacists unsure whether they can fill.
I met a young lady, and her name was Gabrielle. Gabrielle Carriage. And she wasn't married. Just an unfortunate last name. I really hope she went by Ms.
Prescriptions that they've always filled before. A tragic case of rape survivors, including a 10-year-old girl forced to travel to another state for care, wiping out the right to choose on whether you have incest, incest, or having a rape, this is just extreme. Even the life of the mother is in question in some cases, in some states. Republicans in Congress and their extreme MAGA ideology are determined to go even further, talking about nationwide bans that would outlaw abortion in every state under every circumstance, going after the broader right to privacy as well. But as I said before...
by the way, this is not just extreme MAGA. This is not just MAGA. This is the Republican ideology. Liz Cheney, the hero of the Democrats, the bipartisan congressperson who's helping with the January 6th, she's completely anti-abortion. She would pass every anti-abortion bill there was if she had that choice. It's not just a MAGA thing. MAGA, in case you're watching and you don't know, MAGA is Make America Great Again. It's the Trump wing of the party, which is the dominant wing of the party last night, as shown again last night with almost all of Trump's endorsees winning their primary elections.
The fight is not over. And we saw that last night in Kansas. In the opinion of the people, the opinion of the Dobbs case, the extreme majority of the Supreme Court wrote, women, and this is a quote from that case, women are not without electoral or political power, unquote. Court practically dared women in this country to go to the ballot box and restore the right to choose that the court had just ripped away after 50 years. As I said last month, I don't think the court has any notion, for that matter, or the Republican Party for that matter, to decide how far to press their extreme agenda and how women are going to respond. They don't have a clue about the power of American women. Last night in Congress in Kansas, they found out women and men did exercise their electoral and political power. With a record turnout, voters of Kansas defeated a ballot initiative to remove the right to choose an abortion from the Kansas Constitution. It was in the Kansas Constitution. They're trying to strike it and eliminate it from the Kansas Constitution. In a decisive vote, in a decisive victory, voters made it clear that politicians should not interfere with the fundamental rights of women. And the voters of Kansas sent a powerful signal that this fall, the American people will vote to preserve and protect the right and refuse to let them be ripped away by politicians. And my administration has their back. No, today I'm signing the second executive order I'm about to sign that responds to the healthcare crisis that has unfolded since the Supreme Court overturned Roe and that women are facing all across America. Healthcare crisis is, it's hard for me to even understand how they think this. Healthcare crisis is women can't choose, can't get an abortion even in the case of incest, even in the case of rape. But it goes beyond that. There are a lot of women who take prescriptions prescribed by their doctors and have been taking for some time for other conditions, for arthritis, for epilepsy, for Crohn's diseases. And in many cases, these prescriptions are not being filled. Say a 25-year-old woman, her doctor prescribes medication for epilepsy, has been doing it for a while. She goes to the pharmacy. The pharmacist won't fill the prescription because the same medicine could also cause a miscarriage. So she's not getting the medicine she needs for her epilepsy, whether she's pregnant or not. The pharmacy has no right to do that. Just yesterday in Idaho, the Justice Department filed a lawsuit to make sure that pregnant women facing serious threats to their health can get the medical care they need in Medicare-funded emergency rooms. Under federal law, no woman, whether pregnant or not, no matter where she lives, should be turned away or denied necessary treatment during a medical crisis. The Justice Department stepped in to make sure that this extreme state law criminalizing abortion does not put women's health and lives at risk in these situations. This executive order also helps women travel out of state for medical care. Secretary Becerra is going to work with states through the Medicaid to allow them to provide reproductive health care for women who live in states where abortions are being banned in that state. The executive order makes sure healthcare providers comply with federal laws so women don't face delays or denials of medically necessary care. And this executive order advances research and data collection to evaluate the impact of this reproductive health crisis is having on maternal health and other health conditions and outcomes. This executive order builds on the first one I signed last month that created this task force in the first place. And that also will help safeguard access to health care, including the right to choose and contraception, promote safety and security of clinics, patients, and providers, protects patients' privacy and access to accurate information. Let me close with this. Beyond the actions you're taking, I know that along with Kamala, many of you have been traveling the country listening to women, healthcare providers, legal experts, state and local officials and legislators, and others, so that we are doing all we can in my administration to protect the rights of health and safety of the people of this country. You know, their perspectives are going to inform the work of this task force and the recommendations you make to me. I believe Roe got it right. It's been the law for close to 50 years. And I commit to the American people that we're doing everything in our power to safeguard access to health care, including the right to choose that women had under Roe v. Wade, which was ripped away by this extreme court. But ultimately, Congress must codify the protections of Roe as federal law. And if Congress fails to act, the people of this country need to elect senators and representatives who will restore Roe and will protect the right to privacy, freedom, and equality. I'll stop there and turn this over to the Vice President. There's so much more to say, but I'm anxious to hear from all of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Do I sign this order now? I'm going to sign this executive order right now, okay? Okay, folks, we got a lot of work to do, but Madam Vice President, I'm sure you can get it done, sitting there with all those folks. Thank you. I wish I were with you in person, quite frankly, but I'm getting there.
So Biden still has COVID, and he's isolated. He's signing this he's signing this the executive action order in private, and Vice President Kamala Harris is sitting there with some looks like some members of the cabinet and others. So let's see what she has to say about this.
You're on mute. I can't hear you.
We feel your presence, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Well, President Joe Biden has set the tone.
A lot of echo.
For our administration from the very beginning. From the time that an opinion was leaked to the time the Dobbs decision.
Guys, turn off the Zoom feed. Somebody mute somebody.
Came down. And our president has been a leader in saying that the women of...
I don't know I'm pretty sure the interpreter is listening to me and not them. Watch the interpreter here. The last, watch the interpreter's reaction here. I love this.
And our president has been a leader in saying that the women of America should be protected. Their right to make decisions about their own bodies should be a matter that we all defend, understanding that the government should not be in the business of making those decisions for the women of America. Our administration has been very clear, as is clear.
Now I'm just obsessed with watching the interpreter. I love this one. The guy in Georgia and this interpreter here. These are my favorite interpreters. I just love the facial expressions.
By the leaders who are at this table, that we trust the judgment of the women of America to make decisions based on what they know is in their best interest. We trust the women of America to make those decisions if she chooses in consultation with her faith leader, with her physician, with her loved one. But we understand fully the government should not be making that decision for her. And
this is so the opposite of what the Republicans are always accusing the Democrats of, trying to control us with their face diapers, with their closing of the schools. Democrats are trying to control your lives. Oh yeah, you're gonna give birth.
And it is with that spirit that the president...
Sorry that you were raped. That's terrible, but you're having that baby. God damn it, you're having that rapist baby. But the Democrats, don't let them raise your taxes by a penny, because they are coming after your guns.
Convened this task force of these leaders to ensure that we have a whole of government approach to our work.
They figured it out, the audio. They fixed it.
Understanding that every day in America, especially with these extremist so-called leaders in states passing these laws, some of which will criminalize healthcare providers and punish women, that we do everything in our power, in our ability, based on our role, to ensure that we protect the women of America around some of the most intimate decisions that any human being can make. So it is with that spirit and purpose that we convene and we meet. We will be engaged in an in-depth discussion about the role of the various agencies and the cabinet members and their roles of leadership around this important issue. As the president said, the people of Kansas spoke yesterday, and they spoke loud and clear.
Oh, Biden's on mute, but he's coughing. He often coughs, but it looks like he's having a tough time.
Clear.
And he always coughs into his hands. He's never going to change that. I guess after 70 years.
They said this is not a partisan issue. The women of America should not be the subject of partisan debate or perspective. The people of Kansas spoke and said this is a matter of defense of basic principles of liberty and freedom in America.
That's exactly right. She's saying exactly the right thing there.
And they spoke loudly in saying that they trust women to make decisions about their own lives.
I mean, that's going a little bit far. We're going to let women make decisions? Come on. I was with her for a second there when she was talking about the freedoms, but then letting women decide on it. I mean, yeah, the color of the curtains, absolutely. You go for it, because it doesn't make any difference, right? We know that.
And their bodies. And they said government should not be mandating those decisions for...
That's the clip that's going to be pulled out of context when I run for Senate.
...for the women of America. So today we are prepared to do the work that is...
I just watched the interpreter. I love this interpreter.
...is necessary. We will discuss what we have done so far as an administration, and we will discuss what we are prepared to do going forward. I have been traveling the country in recent weeks, talking with, in particular, community-based leaders, healthcare providers, state legislatures and legislators. I've convened faith-based leaders.
That's pretty much everyone. That's not specifically.
We have convened disability rights activists, people from various sectors of our country to talk about this issue. And I will tell you, people are scared. When they look at these laws that are being passed, and they understand what it means for themselves or someone they love, they are concerned, they are confused. When you look at a map, which I have here somewhere, in terms of what this means in our country, and I don't have the map at the moment. My staff will tell me where that map is at the moment. But what we know is that there is a need for clarity around the rights of individuals and states in this moment. And so General Merrick Garland will talk about what the Department of Justice is prepared to do. We know that there are concerns about the kind of support that is available in terms of federal resources to the various states that are protecting the rights of women and what our administration can do to support that. We will be discussing.
Okay, so YouTube just sent me a notification that I'm broadcasting. So welcome everybody who's joining us well into this broadcast. We're watching President Biden. He gave some original remarks on reproductive health care access, and now Vice President Kamala Harris is doing the same.
What we need to do to address the profound misinformation and disinformation that is out there and can only thrive in an environment where there is confusion about what is the right approach and what is the law. So these are some of the topics that we will be discussing. But again, all convened with an understanding and an appreciation for the fact that this, as the President has said, represents a healthcare crisis in America, where women every day in our country, whoever they voted for in any election, understand what is at stake for themselves, their family, and their future. And so with that, I thank all of the leaders who are here. I look forward to our discussion. And because I promised that I have a map, I'm going to now show you that map. And you don't need to necessarily...
Do we not have a poster board? Does C-SPAN not have access to this? Was this not distributed? Come on. That's Merrick Garland and Xavier Becerra sitting next to her.
Able to read the words on the map, but you can see the color coding to understand this map represents our current assessment of the various laws that exist right now.
Oh my God. The Republicans make poster boards of single words. Shall not be infringed. The camera has to scan and pan in order to get them all in, and Kamala's got a piece of paper. I have, if you can read here, it's the address on the...
In these United States of America. Different approaches in different states to this issue.
What do the colors mean? Can you tell?
Which some might argue has been by design to intentionally confuse people about their rights, but what in fact it has done without any question.
Well, thanks though. The map on half a piece of 8.5 by 11 paper really clears things up for us. I appreciate that.
Is made clear that the president's leadership, the leadership of the president's cabinet, and all
couldn't even hold it steady for the camera to zoom in on. Just come on.
All of us at this table is critical.
Well, maybe she thinks nobody's watching. That's pretty typical of the time she's on C-SPAN.
Necessary at this moment. So with that, I thank everyone for being here, and I will now turn it over to the head of our Gender Policy Council.
I like that she's cutting costs. This is all part of the deficit reduction.
Jen Klein, thank you.
Thank you so much, Vice President Harris, and thank you all for being here today. I am going to move us quickly to my co-chair, Secretary Becerra, to talk about the work that you've been doing over at HHS and what you're planning to do.
Mr. President, Madam Vice President, thank you for setting us on a course. Thank you for giving us direction immediately, and thank you for being so prominent and vociferous in explaining how important it is to make sure we are protecting the rights of all Americans, but especially women. I am thrilled to have an opportunity to co-chair, along with my partner, Jen Klein, this task force. Thank you, Jen, for the work that you have done over the years, and certainly now as the co-chair on this task force. To my fellow colleagues on the cabinet and the members of the administration for springing to action so quickly, we say thank you very much. I know we speak for so many people who are waiting for us to do everything we can. Since the Supreme Court's misguided decision put the lives of millions of Americans, our fellow Americans, at risk and stripped away freedom and autonomy, we've all had to take action. And I know that we've all heard from, whether it's patients, doctors, family members, friends, everyone is concerned. At HHS, we heard those voices. We heeded the President's and the Vice President's call for action. Immediately upon the issuance of the Dobbs decision, we launched the reproductiverights.gov website. We were concerned and afraid that something like this might happen, so we put up that website as quickly as we could to make sure that people were not confused, they knew their rights, and we provided as much information and direction as we could immediately for people who were inquiring. We've gone on to protect patient privacy interests and to protect patients and providers from discrimination by issuing guidance. We recently did that by issuing guidance to roughly 60,000 U.S. retail pharmacies. We did it by notifying all health insurance carriers, reminding them of their obligation to respect the civil rights of all Americans and to not discriminate in the dispensation of services and care to all patients. We released our draft rule on non-discrimination in healthcare last week. And just because your state has decided to restrict your access to healthcare does not mean your privacy can be tossed to the wind or you can be discriminated against. We have...
Okay, so we'll pause on that there and jump around C-SPAN a little bit here and see there's been other stuff going on in the news as well. So we'll just check in on a few things. I've got a ton of stuff I'm supposed to do today. Senate to vote on ratifying Sweden and Finland joining NATO. Trump continually attacked NATO. Biden has increased the size of our partnership. By 2. Finland and Sweden, which were 50-year holdouts of NATO, have decided, we should join NATO. That's partly Biden, and it's partly, of course, Putin invading Ukraine. My birthday's the 13th, not the 14th. The key thing, though, is that I'm supposed to raise money on my birthday or thereabouts to send a girl to school in Kenya. So we'll talk about that later. I may end up actually traveling on my birthday. Things are up in the air right now, so life is in flux. So and no one's watching right now anyway, except you 5 people. 5 people. We made it up to 5. YouTube now thinks somebody's here. You've been acknowledged, all of you, so congratulations. So we'll try and raise, I don't know, $350, $400, whatever it is, to send a young girl to school in Africa. Threats to election workers, that could be interesting. The Electoral Count Act. Oh yeah, let's see what's going on here. There's going to be some fireworks here. Let's see. Let's go to speakers. Roy Blunt, Susan Collins. Ted Cruz. We should listen to Ted Cruz talk about that. Yeah, Ted Cruz would be the one that would be interesting. Let's talk to Ted Cruz. And there's no... Okay, gonna have to search for it manually. Let's see. The chair opening remarks. Ranking member opening remarks. These are user-generated. Susan Collins explaining the Electoral Count Act. I cannot sit through that. Election law professor talks about that. Opening remarks from another Brookings Governance Studies senior fellow. The National Association of Colored People Legal Defense Fund opening remarks. That's Klobuchar. There's Norm Eisen. He's the United States Democracy Center and a Brookings Fellow. He's pretty smart. Derek Muller, the University of Iowa College of Law. Let's see what he has to say about the electoral. Let's jump ahead here and see, once we get to the actual senators doing their thing, and see what kind of ridiculousness. Oh, here we go. Let's see what Mark Warner has, because Mark Warner. No, even better. Did I just see Blunt in here somewhere? Yeah, let's...
that reason within our constitutional framework and for the additional points that were made by Mr. Gore and Professor Mueller.
Thank you. Ambassador Eisen, does anything in the bipartisan proposal displace any of the existing federal...
Oh, okay, so there is a bipartisan proposal to... what's the right word? The Electoral Count Act has some questions to it. What happened is in 1876, it was Rutherford B. Hayes versus, who was it, Sam Tilden? Somebody Tilden. And they had a presidential election. It was contentious. And there were accusations of voter fraud. And so 4 states sent their own electors, an alternate set of electors, which you're not supposed to do. So there was no mechanism in there for the electoral count in order to, like we saw with Trump, for a congressperson and a senator from the same state to object, which would then send the chambers into their own 2-hour sessions, and they could discuss whether or not those objections had any merit and vote upon that. That was only created after a commission was created after the 1876 election, and you had 4 sets of alternate electors submitted. It was made up of 5 senators, 5 congresspeople, and 5 justices from the Supreme Court, and they ultimately decided that they didn't have the right to mess with the elections or the electoral count. So the next year, and eventually I think in 1888, they came up with the Electoral Count Act, and it's rarely been used until last year, when you had some senators who decided they were going to cooperate with the Republicans of the House. Now, Congress people have objected to many elections. The Democrats have, the Republicans have. The same going for senators, etc. Senators are usually much more serious about the whole thing. It was last year that for some reason Trump thought that the vice president, even though the vice president's not even named in the Electoral Count Act, that's the president of the Senate, which can be the vice president, can be a senator, can be literally anybody. Doesn't even have to be a citizen of the United States, but as tradition has it, it's usually the vice president who presides, is the presiding officer in those particular moment, acting as the president of the Senate, and they can then just basically read the count. That's all the power that they get in the Electoral Count Act as the presiding officer. And Trump decided that person can decide who gets to be president, which isn't the case. So now the senators are all trying to, not all, sorry. Now the senators are trying to provide clarification to the Electoral Count Act, and rather than just allow one senator or one House member to send everybody into their recesses and into different opposition conferences for 2 hours, to have it like maybe a quarter, 25%, a third, they're still deciding on that.
Or state.
Should we just watch the Alex Jones trial? That might be more interesting. However, with trials, there's hours and hours of boring time. And then, like 2-3 minutes of something interesting. And you can depend on people like Asen and others to put those out there on Twitter for you.
Claims that are available. Now, it does seem like there are plenty of places to go to court, and as others have pointed out, to challenge problems that are perceived or real immediately after.
Is Alex testifying right now? Let's see. We'll pull that up. Oops, something went wrong, it said. Hold on. Let's see, go back here, and let's see if we can pull up.
The article that's shown was written by Jim Fetzer. We heard testimony about him today. He's mentally ill. We throw these terms around like crazy or whatever, and it's unfortunate. He's a mentally ill person. He's a discredited former professor from the University of Minnesota.
That's not Alex Jones testifying. That's Alex Jones sitting at a table. And this is over Zoom, and I can't go back for some reason on this channel. So we'll check that out later. Let's go back to the Senate hearings.
After the election day itself, is there anything that prevents all of those options from continuing to be available?
Senator, the options do remain available. I will note, and I'm going to the place in the bill, that at the end of the 6-day period, in order that the certificate have binding effect here in Congress, that the subsequent state or federal judicial relief, this is in 5C1, has the effect of, in order for that to have effect, it will cut off the state review. So we are establishing a cutoff here, and I know there is some concern by those who actually have to administer this, that with the length of that period. So that is why we would like to have more time in order that state and federal procedures can run their course.
All right, so this is just a discussion on the bill itself.
Would be Mexican one.
Does, and I
There's Mark Warner. Let's see if I
Vice
can
President.
find- I don't know that
Then
Ted
you
Cruz
do.
actually says anything.
First Tuesday.
Question.
As a voter,
I think it's also important.
all of those processes
Conclusion that
is a dramatic improvement.
Sorry,
that question.
C-SPAN doesn't. When you pause C-SPAN, you can't just jump around and see where you are. It plays
Or
every time
it
you hit
Should be solution that
hit
they're
a new place.
the mid 19th century.
Or the vice president.
As far as I recall from Madison's debates at the convention, the notion was that this would largely be a ministerial task, and to the extent that any disputes arose, it was not something that was on the minds of those at the convention. But undoubtedly, very early on, it was recognized that there was going to have to be these actors that were involved, and by the time the 12th Amendment was enacted, it fell to the presiding officer of this joint session, which was the President of the Senate, to sort of handle the ministerial tasks. And
Again, President of the Senate, not the Vice President, although the Vice President is the presiding officer, the President of the Senate, if he's present. Or her.
by 1804, it was recognized Congress counted the votes, and it wasn't until the mid-19th century that we started to have real problems about resolving those disputes. But at the very least, to the extent that Congress was this body, this federal body, that would typically handle political questions for its own members, it seems like an appropriate analog that to the extent there were disputes about the elections of the president, it would handle them in that joint session together to the extent that any disputes arose.
So do you believe that there was any judgment or discretion expected of either Congress or the vice president in that process?
There was, in my judgment, there was no discretion for the vice president.
Yes, no discretion for the Vice President. And Ted Cruz isn't going to hear that.
The President of the Senate. There was suggestions in a debate that happened in Congress in 1800 that there might have to be some questions about what happened during the counting of electoral votes and some discretion that Congress might have. And that's been a pretty narrowly defined role, and especially over the years as we trust the state courts and the states to resolve the process. Narrowly defined role.
But the way that Ted asked the question, you know he's just going to grab that. The discretion. It's narrowly defined, but Ted's going to just take that as carte blanche.
Very rarely has Congress been involved in relitigating those questions, and so it has had a role and recognized a role in the past, but a narrow one when it comes to resolving those controversies that come to Congress.
So as everyone here knows, the election of 2020 was extraordinary in many respects. And as I analyzed what the best approach for Congress should be to that situation, I looked to history and I looked to precedent. And to my mind, the most applicable precedent is the election of 1876.
Well, no, and that we fixed that. After the election of 1876, we fixed it. I was just talking about this. We had the Electoral Count Act, 1887, 1888. So we fixed that so we don't have to go back before that because that doesn't matter anymore. We now have the Electoral Count Act, but Ted's going to go that way. In fact, during 2020, Ted was trying to get an electoral commission put together.
As you know, in the election of 1876, that was the race between Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel Tilden.
Yes.
And that, much like 2020, was a hotly contested race.
Yeah.
There was serious disagreements, and in particular, there were serious allegations of voter fraud from 3 different states, from Florida, from Louisiana, and South Carolina. A total of 4 states, Florida, Louisiana, South Carolina, and Oregon, submitted.
Oregon's the odd one out there, because as far as I know, Oregon did not become a state until like 1956. Like, why? There's no reason for Oregon to even be part of it. There's like 18 people there. Sorry, Oregon.
2 slates of electors, and so Congress exercised.
But yeah, they were a state back then. It's like, I'm pretty sure like California hadn't even been founded, but you know.
Exercising what you just described as the judgment and discretion given it by the framers had to resolve what to do in that instance. In 1876, Congress didn't throw its hands in the air and say, well, there are serious allegations of voter fraud, but we are helpless due electors. And so Congress, exercising what you just described as the judgment and discretion given it by the framers, had to...
No, that's not what he said. They had a very narrowly defined role.
Resolve what to do in that instance.
Yeah.
In 1876, Congress didn't throw its hands in the air and say, well, there are serious allegations of voter fraud, but we are helpless. We are simply
none of which have been proven, by the way. No evidence has ever been put forward that the 1876 election should have been overturned because of fraud. Still waiting on it.
Ministerial clerks, so we can't assess this. Instead, Congress did something very different. Congress, as you know, appointed what it called an election commission. This election commission was a unique creature in constitutional law and in our nation's electoral history, in that it consisted of 5 senators, 5 House members, and 5 Supreme Court justices. And that election commission, in turn, was empowered to assess the evidence of voter fraud, to make conclusive determinations that, in turn, would go forward.
The sad part of it is, even after all this time, and the lack of evidence that we've all been waiting for with the 1876 election, Rusty Bowers would still vote for Samuel Tilden.
Forward and determine who would be the next president. Do you believe Congress made the right decision in 1876 establishing the Election Commission to assess the claims of voter fraud?
Well, that doesn't matter because now we have the Electoral Count Act. So here we are today.
It's a very hard question. I think
yeah.
In that era, there was no Electoral Count Act. And
this guy's smart.
And Congress didn't know how to resolve a dispute between the chambers which was going to arise. And so this was their tie-breaking mechanism to create this commission. And at the end of the day, the commission actually said, and actually concluded by an 8-7 vote, that it was not in its purview to go behind the returns, as the framing was, to investigate the alleged fraud that happened in places like Florida. The goal was to say, what is the true result that comes out of the state? And after that, Congress enacted the Electoral Count Act and has abided by it every 4 years. And on January 3rd, with unanimous consent, a concurring resolution from Congress said, we're going to abide by these procedures. And in my judgment, that is the much more sensible approach, since 1876 was not the best approach. And it was the approach that should have guided what Congress was doing on January 6th, 2021.
Well, and I agree that the 1876 election was the predicate and in many ways the impetus for the Electoral Count Act and attempting to...
No one is arguing with you, Ted.
Codify a process for dealing with disputed elections.
What is your goal here, Ted?
I continue to believe it would have been a better approach for Congress in the 2020 election to have followed the precedent from 1876.
Okay, but that precedent was then super precedented by the Electoral Count Act. Like, we had a solution. We hey, here you go. Oh man, all of the states at any time can dissolve the Union. Well, we should get rid of the Articles of Confederation and we should have a constitution. We should become a constitutional... Okay, but, I mean, guys, honestly, historically the precedent is that Connecticut gets to decide who can, like, any state can blackball any other state's decision. That's what we decided, guys.
And who appointed an election commission. There are a large percentage of Americans who still have deep doubts.
I could take a deep dive into the Articles of Confederation. But who would I be entertaining? Just me. And honestly, isn't that the most important part?
About the veracity of the election. And I think it would have behooved both parties to have a serious, substantive examination on the merits of the facts of those claims. Congress didn't go down that role, and one of the consequences of that now is we continue to have deep divisions in this country.
Uh-huh. That's why. That's why there's deep divisions. Because Congress adhered to the law.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator Cruz, and thank you for allowing Senator Padilla to go first. I am not a big fan of the 1876 election. I wouldn't have been able to vote, for one thing.
Which then just makes me a fan.
I think I'm going to fast.
I'm pretty sure you weren't alive then.
That's true, but I'm just trying to put...
Oh, zing! Zing! From Ted Cruz. Yeah, I'm just saying, if I was alive, do you see how hypotheticals work? I know you're good at the patheticals, but hypotheticals, that's what we're doing right here, Mr. Cruz.
Put it in, a bit of a perspective. So I'm going to fast forward to the present and just ask Senator King is fine.
I happen to live in the present. You?
On questions. This has been an incredibly productive hearing and thoughtful hearing.
Hearings are always
good questions on everyone's part.
All fantastic questions.
Those mechanisms are reasonable or appeal.
whether it ultimately three judges
So I think
by
Amy,
the chief judge of the circuit.
come from different.
Amy's the chairwoman, so she's going to probably wrap
just that
this
there
all up. Yeah.
That could be used by state legislatures to override their popular.
That's all concerning to me.
Sponsors. Candidate can already bring.
Oh, Manchin.
20 given us.
She previously
years of
Put it in today's Iraq.
And now
Central
just jumping around, seeing if there's anything else in here we
Principal
might
point,
find interesting.
clarity.
Probably not. Okay, good. So I just have time for a short broadcast right now. So I will, I don't know, maybe see you later. I haven't been broadcasting as much as I want to lately, but I will endeavor to do more. I shot a commercial yesterday, so I was occupied much of the day doing that. And got a couple of auditions I have to do today, etc., etc. We'll keep going at it. Thank you for watching, everyone. Be good to yourself. Be good to others. And some of you are doing a movie later, so have fun with that. And what is it? Is it Wednesday? All day? Woo! Time flies. And we will talk to you later.